Welcome to the Master Your Mindset and Metabolism podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Dunlap, creator of kellydunlap.com. I am a mindset and metabolism specialist who helps women reprioritize their health, balance their hormones, and reboot their metabolism so they can regain their energy, finally lose the weight, and feel confident in their own skin. I help women break up with the start-over syndrome, all or nothing mindset, get them off the diet wagon so they can create a consistent plan for a sustainable, healthy lifestyle free of diets. In this podcast, we will talk about all the things mindset, metabolism, the role our hormones play in all of this, and how to reboot your mindset and metabolism so you can finally step into your new empowered life. Thank you so much for being here and pressing play. Now let's begin. Hey guys, so happy to have my friend Justin Janoska with us today. Justin is somebody that I was introduced to through Dr. Jade Teta, which you hear me talk about all the time, and not like literally introduced to, but I had taken one of his courses, and Justin happened to be one of the presenters, and I was just so amazed at how deep he went when it comes to the female, the unresolved issues, the underlying issues and things, and the triggers and the genetics and all this kind of cool stuff. And he is just amazing, and he brings a lot to the table. And I am so happy to have you here, Justin. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kelly.
So Justin, he's a really cool person. He is into music and he's very sciencey. I know he's studying to, is it to be, I don't think it's a conventional doctor, right? You said you have 2 more years.
I'm not in medical school. I'm technically doing my doctorate in health sciences. So it's more in the education realm. It's kind of like on par with a PhD, but not in doing research, but taking what's in research and applying it to the population.
Cool. Yes. So, and I know he wrote a book, and he, from what I understand, and maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit because I'm super curious, but from what I understood was that you had kind of gotten into this whole angle of things because your mom had gone through some issues of her own. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe 7 years ago or so, I was in grad school, and my mom had just been diagnosed with Hashimoto's. She had been dealing with symptoms for many years, but yeah, you know how it is. No one could put a label on it, and it was a little too late. So she finally got Hashimoto's, and I kind of just witnessed her going through the whole circus act with allopathic medicine and endocrinology, and no one really figuring it out or giving her any real solutions aside from medications and some basic dietary adjustments and supplements, which, you know, only gets you so far. Yeah. And I took it upon myself to kind of dig into this and see what I could pull from my professors, what I could learn in school, and full access to a library and all this stuff. You know, I was just amazed by all the overwhelming evidence and things that we find in the literature about how to control not just Hashimoto's, but autoimmune disease, because it is a lifestyle-driven disease, and people think it's genetics. And yeah, there are genetics involved, but it's really, I mean, why is it rising every year? Why is autism rising? It's the same overarching idea that there's something in the environment. There's a lot of things, not one thing. And that was the case here. And so I just kind of was like, well, I'm going to start looking into this more and see what I can do to help her. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but even functional medicine and practitioners in that realm were not doing much for her either. It was very much a lot of the same surface level stuff, as I say. Mm-hmm. And no one had talked to her about her past and her trauma and the emotional side of things. And that was another insight I had later on, and why I think, you know, from that, and also what I experienced personally in my life and witnessing with clients collectively, is what moved me into the trauma field, which is why I'm doing my doctorate in trauma counseling, basically. So it kind of evolved. I never imagined ever that I'd be in this position, but it all started with my mom and her journey.
I love that. And that you were just such a huge advocate for her. And I see that all the time. I see that, you know, you have this doctor patient disconnect. And so oftentimes I'll kind of explain to people saying, hey, I kind of fill the gap in between you and the doctor a lot of times, because they often, as you know, don't take the time, have the patience don't even want to bother, quote unquote. That's how people feel. They, in my experience, so many clients are like, you're fine. You're within range. So I call that the line of fine. And it's like, but no, you're not optimal. You were just surviving at that point. Like that it makes me so angry, and then you have these people that are just lost and spinning and I don't know what to do. And they don't know where to turn. And then they're Googling everything. And then they get an overload and that creates more stress and, more traumas, all these things. And it just exacerbates everything. And they just have nowhere to turn. So I love what you're doing. And I love the fact that you said that you were moving into more of that trauma component, because that is so, so needed. And I know for me that when I started to really explore that piece within scope, of course, that it really was beneficial for a lot of clients because they were not even aware. Like they have no idea. They just think one day that they just wake up and this is just how it is. Like Dr. Gabor Mate, are you familiar with him? You probably are. Love him. And, he talks about the myth of normal and how, there's this and this and when I heard him break some things down, I was like, okay, yes, this is absolutely, and I know for me, I fall into a lot of those categories. I have Epstein-Barr. I have, the whole thyroid thing. I have an autistic son, so when I heard you speak at Dr. Jade's, Metabolic Female, I was like, oh my God, raising my hand. And I just found it so fascinating because I thought that we need more people like you. We need to really create an army of this awareness, people creating this awareness so that people are like, oh my gosh, that's me. And now I need to dig a little bit deeper and be a better advocate for my health and stop being so surface level.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
So it's really fascinating to me how so many people just, they don't know to dig deeper. They just don't know what they don't know, and that's just super, super unfortunate. So I know that you deal with a lot of complicated cases and you help people to connect the dots. And, I know you and I both are on that same page too, where we like to take more of that natural and alternative standpoint and really kind of pulling out these things. But I know that you also deal a lot with, there's a PCOS kind of portion or wing of what you do. And you help a lot of women with that. How did you lead there? Like what led you there?
I think that came, it is strange, right? Because it's a very specific part of gynecology, you might say, or I don't know, it's a lot of things, but it kind of happened because again, it kept showing up on my doorstep. And with Hashimoto's, we know in the research, and I see it all the time clinically, I mean, people have both, and there's a reason for that. So specifically Hashimoto's and PCOS, it's not PCOS and lupus or PCOS and MS, it's Hashimoto's. So there is some overlap. And I think, for me, that is something you can't ignore. And I want to be, well-versed in as many things that are relevant or make sense for me without spreading myself too thin. Because I was at that point in my life where I need to know every disease. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. So I just got really good at these few things. And so, that's why. And to be fair, a lot of women I worked with and have worked with have been just young females, athletes, or people that did a bikini competition or the CrossFit or something where they were under a lot of physical duress for a long period of time. And that's one way PCOS shows up. So it's not just paired with autoimmune disease, but my first experience with females and women's health was PCOS, actually, in that population of the young females and the challenges they were facing with excessive exercise and dieting. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, but it just kind of came back around. And it's actually, one of the more, one of the conditions I've had the most success with for some reason. I don't know what it is,
but honestly, I think it is such a true epidemic. It really, really is. It's just growing and growing and growing and growing. And so many people just don't know what to do. I am actually inside of a community of PCOS, and it is just so sad. All of these women are so stuck. They're frustrated. They are desperate. they're growing hair, they're, and I know that there's kind of two different versions that, but a lot of them are growing this hair and this acne, and they are just stuck, and there's no connection. A lot of times nobody's, kind of showing this. But here's the thing too, and maybe you might come across this, is that sometimes people aren't willing to see, meaning that they're only willing to hear so much, and they don't want to open up that Pandora's box or trash can, I guess, to kind of like own some truth, own some responsibility, for lack of better words, in the sense that I know for me, it took me a while to say, yeah, I created my shit show. And yep, my whole, exercising 3 times a day and eating a potato, that certainly did not serve me at all. So then we have to, spend all this time in resolving and healing, really, Yeah.
So, it's tough because people do become a victim with this, and same with autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. And I actually find that the PCOS population is the hardest to really tap into and work with, because a lot of people are just in huge disbelief, or they're so they're so skeptical and doubtful, more so than anything else, more than any other condition for some reason, because I don't know what it is, but they've been burned so many times and they feel like it's impossible to get better. And even if they're faced with the real truth and evidence, they still are doubtful and skeptical. That's what medical trauma and a lot of things that they may have experienced personally has done. And for me, I'll just tell you this, Kelly, like the hard thing in this work is not about really helping people. It's getting them to believe that they can be helped. Yes,
exactly. And that's what I mean about hearing us, right? It's like, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. They lack trust because they have been just handed a prescription, or I don't know what to do with you, or you just need to lose weight, figure it out, and they're traumatized. And so there is that kind of like, how are you different? How are you going to help me? Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. So true. So you had said, there was a statement that I thought was super powerful. You had said something to the effect that the genetics holds the gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
I didn't coin that, but yeah, people say that.
I love that. That was it. Well, you're the first time I heard that. I was like, yes, it is so brilliant. So that, in other words, is like the epigenetics piece, right? So it's kind of like would you say that, if I'm articulating this correct, is that we all have this potential disposition, right? So we might have these SNPs, or we might have these things that we have these, potentials that could be. And I think Dr. J describes it as kind of like pulling up the sleeve and putting down the sleeve kind of thing, where it's like you have the ability to cover, to kind of lessen your risk of triggering these things. And I thought that was brilliant. So it's kind of like exposing it versus kind of keeping a lid on it, so that you can kind of, that if you live your life in a way that we have we are in control of whether or not something comes to surface.
Yeah. In fact, I even think Gabor Mate said this, but, genetics, they predispose, they don't predetermine. So that's really in a nutshell what you're saying, what we're talking about with that analogy. But it's so easy to point the finger at our genes and our family heritage or whatever for why we're sick. And I hear it all the time still. But that's just about awareness and lack of awareness that we have around this autoimmune disease stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting too, like the smallest little things. And this stuck in my head, Justin, when you had said, if you go get a coffee, don't put the lid on it. Like, don't get that plastic lid. And I was like, oh, like my mind was blown. And it's those little tiny things that we can do on a day-to-day that really compact, that can affect us positively and negatively. So let's talk about that for a second, because that's all about the BPA and such, correct? In the plastic. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny for me. I don't really pick on toxins and chemicals too much, because I think we get so wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
And really obsessive about it, because you hear a lot about this in the functional medicine space. At least I do.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's how many hundreds of thousands of chemicals out there, and we want to blame this is one. This the dioxins that are making me sick, and it's like maybe, but there are certain chemicals that need to be paid attention to that we need to take into account. And BPA is one of them, and it's one of those that seem to be at the top of the pyramid, or the totem pole, if you will. When it comes to Hashimoto's and PCOS, for example, we know that it's a real issue, and so we want to look into that stuff, and we want to try to minimize, because plastic is everywhere. We're all getting exposed to it, but it's one of the more prevalent chemicals we're constantly being exposed to that we can try to control. Not like we can control everything, but that's one of the ones we do. So the coffee lid, the Tupperware thing, and the thermal receipt paper, and plastic water bottles, stainless steel is better, right? Glass, whatever. And even with your cookware, and like getting out of Teflon and those sort of things. So those are, some of the more manageable things that probably aren't going to just turn your life around, but they do make an impact at a deeper cellular level.
Yeah. And on that cellular level, that's where the mimicry comes in, right? Yeah. And how certain things can come in and your cells kind of read it as something that it's actually not, or something. I've always had a difficult time explaining the mimicry. Are you able to break that down a little bit so that somebody understands? Like, I know that estrogens or something can be mimicked in the body, and there's something with dairy and, that kind of stuff.
Well, it's a little different, but yeah, xenoestrogens are just exactly that, where they just mimic the estrogens in the body, and they just can do some gnarly things that we're not ready for, and oversensitize set receptors and activate cells and do things more than we need to. And estrogen is a double-edged sword. I mean, it's good, and it's also it's like insulin. It's like too much is good, too little is not good. And for breast cancers, things like that. But we also need it for bone health, so it's like, and there are different forms of estrogen. That's a whole different discussion, but
sure.
Yeah. I mean, with molecular mimicry, I mean, it's just one of those mechanisms in autoimmune disease that, we're all dealing with it. Actually, we all have autoimmune mechanisms going on inside of us, that pretty much all healthy humans too. Doesn't mean it's pathological though. So, but with that mechanism, it's basically saying that you have a compound like BPA, or you have Epstein-Barr virus, or you have some other pathogen perhaps that looks identical to your own bodily tissue. So if we're talking about Hashimoto's or Graves', the thyroid looks similar to this antigen, this protein on a particular toxin or pathogen. And because of the HLA pattern and the immune system and the genetics that are behind it, that will direct that immune cell to target your own tissue because it looks similar to that pathogen or toxin.
Yeah.
And that's how the fire gets started with autoimmune disease. At least one way it happens. And so that's basically that's basically what it is. It's kind of just a simple thing like that, but obviously not too simple. But this is happening many times with many things. So it's this cross reactivity is happening a lot. And it gets, the immune system just gets confused, misfires, and attacks your own tissue because it sees this thing. But unfortunately, what's crazy is that you can remove, say, for example, the thyroid and get a thyroidectomy, which I've seen happen, and people still have Hashimoto's. So how does that happen, right? Well, they have the symptoms of it. They still have issues going on, but the autoimmune process doesn't change necessarily because the organ is removed. This is just the crazy thing about autoimmune disease. And what I'm trying to say is that the molecular mimicry thing, or the autoimmune process that's driving it, can still be there, even if the tissue that was being attacked is no longer there. It'll find something else to attack. So this is why it's confusing and crazy at the same time, because you can have these mechanisms go on all the time, and it may not necessarily be a bad thing. It just depends on what the outcome is and what the destruction and the tissue looks like under the MRI or in the scans you're doing. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. I mean, because I can even say this about myself, and I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but there was like one point in my life where just none of this was even on my radar, none of it. And I just assumed that, hey, if it's being sold in the store, or if it's, it's fine. I'm sure if I could buy it, I mean, everything is regulated. And then the first time that it was brought to my attention from the first coach that I ever hired, because I was at a point in my life where I was just like, I don't care what I have to do, just take my money. Like, I just feel so terrible and something's got to give. Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing here? And here I was, like the personal trainer, aerobics instructor, quote unquote, the healthy person. And I was just a mess. You know what I mean? And it was like, well, I got my shit together because I exercise every day. And you know what I mean? But little did I know, it's like I was just overloading my body with toxins. I had no idea. All the garbage garbage supplements, just all this crap, And so when she brought it to my attention about just generating awareness, Justin, I swear to God, I thought, why am I even in this grocery store? Nothing in here is of value. Everything to me was harmful. I thought, okay, well, I guess I need to buy a farm and raise all my food,
Mm-hmm.
It was just so mind blowing to me. And so I'm hoping that somebody listening to this episode would say, I never even thought about that, or I had no idea, or, oh my gosh, So even like implants, sometimes they can affect people. I have implants, never really been bothered by them. At least I don't think, from my awareness. Botox, I get it. I don't think it's really ever bothered me so much, but I mean, it's okay. Right. And I know that you're not against it or anything, but you're just generating awareness about it. And you are, you bring it to people's attention because it potentially could be. Now, a few years ago, it was a big thing about explants and this is causing it and da, da, da. Maybe it was a contributing factor, but was it the cause? We don't necessarily know. But I think what is so fascinating too, is that when I ask people, like I'll say, do you have an autoimmune disease? No, not that I know of. Have you ever had mono? Oh yeah. And so they don't have this awareness that certain things are actually autoimmune diseases. And I think at the time you had shared a list of like over 100 of them, which is insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So I guess my point being is that there's just so much that is not talked about. There's so much that people are not aware of. And there are just these small little tiny tweaks that could just at least start their journey. Like somebody might say, you know what? I heard Justin say something about this coffee thing. And then they stop putting the lid on their coffee. And maybe just that one thing then leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then before you know it, they've kind of cleaned up their environment. And, then they start to just be, feeling better and maybe, just a better functioning, optimal human,
Yeah, that's what you hope for. Just get something going and then it kind of snowballs.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And it's just really about, generating that awareness. And the other thing too is, here's an example. My husband went to get his labs done because he's tired all the time and all this stuff. So they, as you know, they only do the basic test. They're not going to test for all the things. His TSH came back at 4.30. The doctor says, oh, well, you're within range. And I'm like going, like to me, that's just crazy. These within ranges make me insane, crazy, so what I'm getting at, what I'm leading to is that how there are so many red flags and there's information that these doctors might see, but then people don't get diagnosed for years and years later. And I think one of the examples you had used before was about how lupus antibodies could be lingering around 7 to 10 years prior. And, these things can be somewhat prevented, like where they're not suffering and such. So when it comes to, the within range and the labs, what is your take on that? Like me, I went crazy when he said, you're fine at 4.30. And to me, I'm like, that is absolute disservice. You need to run, but I told my husband, I said, I think we need to get a little bit more information. Like there's some other tests that we can get, we should look for some other things, but just kind of want to get your take on the conventional range.
Well, depends on what biomarkers we're talking about, right? And
Yeah.
I think, if we're looking at CBC stuff, that's one thing, and CMP is another. And generally, the reference ranges are too wide, and I think that's something we have come to a consensus on in the functional medicine space. So what's normal for them is not what's optimal, right? That's the difference. Yeah. So we're using narrow ranges because this is what we find is, and now maybe anecdotal, maybe there might be some evidence behind it, I think, but I have found, at least with thyroid and looking at thyroid panels, that it's definitely got to be a narrow range. And all I know about is the narrow range in my head. So I'm thinking, free T4 is like 1 to 1.5, and it's probably much wider than that. And so I look at these things and they do matter, because the symptoms are also going to be there probably. And we know that this stuff gets overlooked all the time, and people are actually are flirting with subclinical hypothyroidism or a full overt hypothyroidism and don't know it. They're told they don't have it. They don't believe they do. And then they're kind of confused. And this is why a lot of people kind of walk around undiagnosed with autoimmune disease and Hashimoto's, for example, when they oftentimes might have it. So that's why I asked them the question, do you have an autoimmune disease? Is kind of a stupid question, because why would they ever believe they do? They have no reason to believe.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't even know what that looks like, because no one's ever talked to them about it, because their labs are normal, right? TSH is a different story. So it's a lot of things, but TSH is interesting because when you're on medication, it's a certain range. When you're not on medication, it's another range. And the range can be even higher than we think, and you can still be fine. It's not, I used to believe that used to be narrower, and that used to be like, under, 4.5 or something. But I think there's some data even showing that people can be healthy and have it of 8 and 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's certainly not the only thing you want to look at in isolation, though. Sure. So, but generally speaking, a high TSH is not ideal. And so, you have people I've seen people have it in the hundreds actually with Hashimoto's, and that is a big deal.
That's a huge deal. It's so interesting though, how people, the saying that, you quote unquote treat the client or whatever, and not the labs and what have you. But I think what is so sad to me is that people don't know what it actually feels like to feel good or to feel optimal, that they are just walking around like, okay, this is just how I feel because I'm getting old. This is just a part of getting old. And then they believe that, and, and then until they start to feel better, then they're like, oh my God, why wasn't I doing something about this? Or why didn't somebody tell me? Or I had no idea, So, and that makes sense. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on that. And obviously, there are so many variables. And like you said, there's other things that can be looked at and what have you. But it's just really interesting to me how there is just no extra step, like in the conventional world, that really kind of bothers me, where it's kind of like, well, this could look better. And maybe, there's really just no advice. And I looked at the notes from the doctor, and he just said, everything looks good. And there's been no follow-up, no nothing. And so it's just a little bit of a rub for me,
right.
But anyway, so if you were to, if somebody that's listening that's female and suspects that there's something that's not quite right, and they are just not feeling their energetic self, they might have, issues like their body is just achy, and there's all these things. What, in your opinion or in your advice, would you say would be the first step that somebody takes in order to start being their, the best investigator of their health, and to really kind of get down to what is going on in there, quote unquote?
Well, I think firstly, go to your primary care physician and just get an idea of what they're saying. I mean, they could find things that really are serious. Maybe it's a tumor, maybe it's cancer, whatever.
Yeah.
So like you need to rule that out. I mean, and they're the experts for that.
Totally agree.
When it comes to like these lifestyle driven issues, like, yeah, that's where things fall through the cracks, and people get dismissed or ignored, or they said it's psychosomatic or whatever. I mean, that's going to happen maybe, but again, for me, I've kind of changed my whole view in this. And I used to be like, yeah, doctors suck. They need to get their stuff figured out, and big pharma's got to get out of their head, and what, but that's the truth. I mean, we know this, but it's not a mystery. But I've started to become more empathetic and compassionate for them, because, and this is something that might be strange to some listeners, but when you really think about it, because I just finished a class on leadership in healthcare, so learning about the healthcare system and kind of what's going on, and it's complicated to say the least.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I've learned recently is that these doctors are doing the best they can, given with the scripts and the protocols and the things they're told to do, and they have to have there's certain standards they have to meet, and or for them to stay within the prestigious communities and their reputation. And it's really not about ego so much, although I'm sure that's part of it. But they really have to just do this, because guess what? They might want to order that random antibody test or that biomarker you want them to do, but they won't do it because they're going to get a lot of crap from insurance. Why did you do this? You don't really need that. And that's what happens. And then guess what happens when they do that? You might get slammed with the bill because they're not going to cover it. So that's part of the politics of this, the allopathic model. And that's what I'm trying to say is they're doing the best they can given what they have. So, and here we are, a lot of these, enthusiasts and these rebels that are like, I'm going to show you and bring out the stack of studies and prove to you that it's wrong. They don't care. It doesn't change their approach. They're not going to change. Even if they agree with you, it's not going to do much. They might have empathy and want to be like, yeah, I would love to help you. I might, stretch or take this risky thing and make this happen for you. That's rare. It doesn't really happen. So what I'm trying to say here ultimately is that do what you need to do, get the answers you get from them, but take it with a grain of salt, and then go somewhere else and explore a naturopath or alternative medicine, and then do some research and learn. You got to be informed some way in order for you to really be empowered. But the worst thing you can do is surrender and give in and just say, this is it. This is all I got. And they can't figure it out. And I'm just going to live this way. Because look, labs can say one thing, doctors can say something, you can say this, I can say that, but it doesn't really matter. Your body tells you. If you have symptoms, something is off. That is your message. That's your teacher. And that is the thing that we just lose sight of as a society. It's that the diagnosis, the disease, whatever you have, tells you a story, not just about your cells, but of yourself. And whatever you have going on, it may not be severe, but it's something that your body is alerting you to, and alerting you and telling you to look deeper in. So with that in mind, logically, we should be continuing to pursue this and figure it out. But guess what? It's your job to figure it out. It's not anyone's job to fix you or cure you or heal you. But we think that for some reason still. Yeah. Anyway, that's my rant about
I love that. And thank you for sharing that. Honestly, like it here's the thing. So now it makes sense where I will see sometimes doctors pivot, where they just kind of pivot out. So it's almost like they're saying, it's almost like a values thing, where it's like, I don't feel fully aligned with this container anymore because I don't want to play the politics anymore. I don't.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. And I've never even heard it described in that manner. And I love that. So thank you for sharing that, because it gives you just okay, now I kind of know what to expect. And I understand why this is, instead of playing the internal mind game that I'm running through my filter. So what the heck? Well, they just don't want to do anymore. And they're just da 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 da. You know what I mean? And you could just go on and on, but they're really choosing to kind of be there, like, because of the whole, it's just like a whole, I think of like a country club. Yeah. Like, it's like they want to be part of that community, and that's totally cool, and that's fine, and that's where they are, and that's all good and well. Now, I make notes, you know, as you're talking, which I love, but I love how you talk about the body is telling you, you know, which people don't get, like, they don't recognize, like, okay, oh, these symptoms, oh, these are symptoms. I thought that this was just normal. Like, I didn't realize that. So is it Dr. Gabor that says the body keeps the score? You know, that's
a Vanderkolk, but yeah.
Is it okay? So yeah, I'm just all over the place. Like, but I knew that there was one of them. Somebody said it, but something about how, you know, the body is keeping the score. It's always going to tell you when something is wrong. Symptoms are basically your check engine light, and when we don't move into being our, like you said, be informed and kind of get this resolved, you're just like putting a piece of tape over your check engine light on your car. Now, would you ever do that? No, you would get the damn car fixed. You would do whatever you had to do to get the car fixed, you know? So I love that, how you explained that about the physician. And I completely agree with you. Go to the primary care doctor first. Always, always get what you can out of them. Take that data information and go from there. It's not the end all be all. And I think that that's what you and I both will stand strong by, is that that's just one of the places that you can go to get information. It's just one, you know, and you have to continue to keep looking and, you know, seeking and finding, because somebody has the answers. But if somebody, you know, let's say somebody comes to you, I know that you would refer them, you know, to somebody that can, or possibly could. You know, so there's always going to be to be somebody that's willing to listen. You just have to continue to, you know, to find that right person.
The worst thing we can do, and people do this, is to be antagonistic and fight and complain and just get argumentative with them about it, which people do, and then take that home and rant about it in Facebook groups and to their spouse, and then lash out at their kids. Because here's what I'm going to say is that you're the one losing at the end of the day. It's not them. Mm-hmm. And you're only going to feel worse, because guess what really got you sick in the first place? Probably is all the psychological stress you had in your life. And then you're just reinforcing it. So like, it's always going to be about controlling you, which is really the overarching and the fulcrum of what I teach people, is because challenges and difficulty, whether it's this or something else, is not going to change. It's all about working on what's inside and not being reactive, but being more reflective, and all that stuff. It's a hard skill set to develop, but we can do it. But that is the real teaching, because that's what's going to keep you, you know, to sustain the life you want and to weather the storm.
Yeah. The resiliency, right? So we have to develop resiliency in so many areas of our life. And it is a tough skill set, you know, just like with my husband going to the conventional doctor, you know, I could get all mad and angry and da 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 and more, you know, da da da. But like my husband said, what do we do? I just said, well, now we have this information. Now we need more. We just need more information. So, you know, and you're absolutely right. I talk about the underlying unresolved issues that are in the background, like apps running in the background of our phone. It's like, we don't really know that they're there, but it's there, and it's draining us, and it's, you know, leading us humans, you know, literally when we have that crap in our mind and we're just so identified with that crap, you know, that we're just going to be creating illness at the end of the day. So,
yes.
But totally. Yes, I love it. I love all this. This is such a lovely conversation. And thank you so much, Justin, for taking the time. I just love to get different perspectives and points of view. And, you know, I love the work that you're doing. And I was telling him before we hit record that he's got some pretty funny reels that he's been putting together, and, you know, just kind of keep doing what you're doing, because it's fabulous. And, you know, one thing that I wanted to ask you before I wrap this up is, you had, I think it's on your Instagram, about anti-protocol or no protocol or something like, So what does that mean exactly? Is it just another way of saying no cookie cutters? Like, you know,
well,
everybody's individualized?
I've kind of loosely called myself the anti-protocol practitioner. I should have said that at the beginning of this recording. But like that's, you know, it's a joke kind of, but not really. Because I mean, I just started to recognize that, well, I'm not really giving protocols. I mean, I'm not. In fact, it's just a blank sheet of paper basically when we're starting, you know, but it's I'm poking fun at the issue right now, but I'm also being serious about how much of this is a natural organic thing. And like, it doesn't mean we're just kind of like guessing and taking shots in the dark, but there is no 15-page PCOS or Hashimoto's or MS protocol that you're going to get from me. And, you know, a lot of people have that. They get packets of stuff. Avoid this, cut this out, take the supplements 4 times a day, do sauna 8 times a week, and whatever. Coffee enema this, parasite cleanse that. It's like, all right, enough, right? And it's exhausting. And it's like, if you get stressed out about the protocols you're doing, then forget it. I don't care how healthy it is for you. You're not going to get any better. And that's what you see. And it's exactly what keeps showing up at my doorstep. So I'm not, some people think I might be crazy, but like there is a protocol, but we're creating it. It's obviously specific to you, but it is far from what most are experiencing, which is kind of like getting this right out of the gate. And I don't know what you have. I don't know what you need yet. And, but the problem is that people have these practitioners and doctors have these biases, and they want people on all this stuff. And I think you should do this and this and do that. And it's overwhelming, and it's very expensive a lot of times. And people don't really get results with it a lot of times, or they do, but they're fleeting. So that's sort of my take on it. And why we're just trying to, I mean, you might think of it as like I'm rattling the cage and trying to be the polarizing, which, I guess I am, but it's not because I'm doing it for that reason, but because it just makes sense in my head that it's the right way to do things.
I didn't think that at all. I thought it was great because I thought, you know, that's exactly my view on it, is the fact that, like you said, I don't know what you have and I don't know what you need just yet, but we have this blank sheet of paper and we are going to figure it out, and we're going to do the best that we can, and we're going to give you what you need as you go. Because you're absolutely right. When we get these women, their brain is already on overload, fight or flight constantly. The last thing that they need is a 20-page PDF protocol. Take this out. And then like, oh my God, I can't do this. Now I am set up for failure, you know, and it doesn't help take them to their healing, which is ultimately where we want them to go. So I totally get it.
They're busy enough as it is. And they're taking another job, basically.
Right. Yes. They're like, I didn't sign up for this. Like, what the hell? You know, so I totally get it. And I love it. I think it's great. You know, I just wanted to ask you about that. So I thought that was super brilliant. But anyway, thank you so very much again for taking the time. And I just think you have so much to offer. And I definitely want to put in the show notes how people can find you, you know, get your book, any, you know, resources or Facebook groups that you might have. I think that would be so helpful. And it was just such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you love what you heard, please be sure to share it with me by leaving a review. If you aren't already following me on social media, come find me on Facebook by searching Kelly Dunlap, or come join me in my Master Your Mindset and Metabolism Facebook group by going to kellydunlap.com/group. I cannot wait to connect with you on the next episode.